Hey everyone, welcome back. Today I will be sharing my book review of The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. I'm also going to be sharing reading advice, and I'm also going to share some background information about the author and about this work. First of all, how much time did it take me to finish this huge novel? I actually surprised myself. I finished it in a month. I started reading on the 18th of October and I finished on the 22nd of November. I was also reading multiple books at the same time, so this wasn't my only read. So it certainly isn't impossible for you to finish this book over the course of a month. What is this story about? So we follow Edmond Dantes, and he gets falsely accused for a crime and he ends up in prison for 14 years. Now the terrible thing is that he has been framed by his friends out of jealousy. Now when he escapes his prison after being a prisoner for 14 years, he decides to take revenge on these friends and their families who betrayed him. The interesting thing is that this story is based on the true life story of one François Picot. Dumas researched this event and what happened, and he used it as an inspiration for writing The Count of Monte Cristo. It begins in 1815, covering the period before, during, and after the 100 Days. This is a series of events that occurred in France between Napoleon's return from exile on the island of Elba and his final defeat at Waterloo. It is known that Alexandre Dumas worked together with a man named Auguste Maquet, who helped him with writing the outlines of his chapters and doing research. Together with Victor Hugo and Alfred de Vigny, Alexandre Dumas was the leading dramatist of his age. At a certain point, Dumas wrote a play called Christine, and Vigny and Hugo stayed up all night to rewrite the play into something more manageable of a size. The Count of Monte Cristo was praised by Victor Hugo, by Dostoevsky, and Leo Tolstoy. The Count of Monte Cristo was published in the newspaper over the course of 2 years between 1844 and 1846. It was an absolute immediate success. Everyone was talking about this book over the course of 2 years, and it got translated into many languages. After Dumas' his death, Victor Hugo wrote a letter to his son praising Dumas, his work. It has been called a children's novel by many critics, but I can tell you this is not a children's novel at all. I also want to use a quote from the introduction explaining how it is not a children's novel, because it contains a female serial poisoner, 2 cases of infanticide, a stabbing, 3 suicide, an extended scene of torture and execution. So yeah, not a children's novel at all. Now let's talk about my experience with this work. I am still having a book hangover because I finished it last month and I still cannot believe that I cannot go on, that it's finished and that I need to let go. I'm still trying to let go, but my mind is still so much in this world that he created, and it became one of my favorite books I ever read. I loved it so much. It is about 1,300 pages, but it could have been longer for me. I could have read 1,000 more pages of this book. Injustice always hits me very hard. It is one of the strongest emotions that we can feel as a human being, that is injustice. It was very intimate to follow the life of these characters, because we don't only follow Edmond Dantes, our main character, we also follow the friends that betrayed him and their families and their friends and everyone's life, and every character that is introduced in this novel plays a huge role, and every character introduced is important to the plot. For me, the pacing was perfect. It wasn't too fast, it wasn't too slow, and I wanted to keep going after every chapter. Now let's talk about the characters. There are many characters, many families that we get introduced to. I highly recommend making your own family tree as you go through the book. So when someone new gets introduced, just write down the name. I did the same and it helped me tremendously. Don't look up a family tree and don't look at the family tree if there is one in your novel, because it's going to spoil the story for you, okay? Because there are some surprises about who is related to who and so on. So I highly recommend not looking up a family tree. I loved reading about the villains in this book. They are black and white, so at certain moments you will care for them and at other moments you will despise them, and that was something that I absolutely loved. Like, I cared about every character in this book. My personal favorite characters were Noirtier, Albert and Maximilien. These characters all became my friends, and I am convinced that they will stay with me over the course of my life. All of the characters eventually come together at the end of the novel, and it is glorious. Alright, so let's talk about the writing style next. I love Dumas, his writing style. First of all, I want to say that I have seen people being very rude to readers who prefer the Count of Monte Cristo over the Three Musketeers. They say that the Count of Monte Cristo is badly written, that it is just an action novel, and that it is poorly written, that it isn't high literature, which I disagree with wholeheartedly. I think this book is brilliantly written. Everything plays out before you. It is like watching a movie. And I must say, this Robin Buss translation is phenomenal. I'm super impressed by this translation, and I highly recommend picking the Robin Buss translation by Penguin Classics. Dumas uses a lot of dialogue and he is very descriptive. It isn't flowery, it's just very to the point and very fast paced. So now I would like to share some quotes that I marked that I absolutely loved. Mankind will not be perfect until it can create and destroy like God. It can already destroy, that's half the battle. All I can tell myself is that fate has turned against me, that I expected to win heaven and I have lost it. It happens every day that a gambler loses not only what he has, but also what he does not have. No halfway emotions can exist in a heart swollen with utmost despair. I have spoken your name with sighs of melancholy, with groans of pain, and with the croak of despair. I have spoken it frozen with cold, huddled on the straw of my dungeon. I have spoken it raging with heat and rolling around on the stone floor of my prison. Anything that you might have to say to me will never be worth what I can read in your eyes, what your heart has thought and mine felt. Only someone who has suffered the deepest misfortune is capable of experiencing the heights of felicity. So, what is my advice when you decide you want to read The Count of Monte Cristo? First of all, break it into sections. You are free to use my book club schedule, which I will link in the description box, and you can just use it if you want to. I have broken this edition into chapters a day. Manageable amount of chapters a day. If you decide to follow that schedule, then you will be finishing the book over the course of, I think, 2 months. Secondly, make your own family tree and do not look up anything about this novel because you will get spoilers. My third tip is to not go with an abridged version of this novel. I think every chapter is worth your time, so I highly recommend going for the full non-abridged version. Next tip is to look up things that you don't understand or things that you're interested in researching. For example, there are a lot of references to other works of literature, to opera plays, music, artwork, look them up, listen to the music that Dumas is referring to while reading, and it will make your experience so much better. I want to end this video by saying that I didn't yet watch any movie adaptations, and I must admit that now that I read the book and that I love it so much, I'm a bit reluctant to watch a movie because I love the characters so much and I've built them and created them in my head, and I'm not willing to give that up. But for the sake of this video, I will watch the movie and I will come back later and tell you guys my opinion on the adaptation that I decided to watch. Hi, okay, I am back. I watched the movie. I chose to watch the 2003 adaptation of the Count of Monte Cristo, and the movie started out so good. I was so impressed. Then in the middle of the movie, things started to go so fast. And first of all, I also want to say that the cast was really well chosen. I really loved the characters. But the book is so packed with amazing characters and important events, and they had to just cut too much. And I realized that they cannot put a 1,200 page book into a 2-hour film. That is impossible. And I also realized that things that work in a book do not necessarily work on screen. So I can live with the fact that they manipulated certain events and that some things weren't like they were in the book. But the biggest problem I had was with the ending. Like from the middle of the movie until the end of the movie, they have changed so much. They even changed the entire ending. Like they made it all happy, and I don't know, I just didn't like the ending and how they changed everything. It is a great movie, but if you've read the book, I think many readers will have an issue with everything going so fast and a lot of characters being cut from the movie. So the ending kind of ruined it for me. So yeah, my advice would be to read the book. Now let's get back to my video. If you're wondering about my tabbing system, I used green for important things that happened in the story. I used yellow for quotes, used orange for references to novels, to music pieces, to anything that has to do with references, and then I use blue for emotional moments. I also have a video on how I tab and annotate my books, so if you're interested in that whole process, you can check out my video. Concerning the references, I actually made an entire Excel list of references to other works of literature, to composers, to art, and I am planning on going through that entire list and add those books to my to-be-read list. I love finding my next read in a book that I'm reading. Like if he, for example, references to Voltaire, I just write that down. I write down what the work is, and then I just add it to my to-be-read list, and it's a great way to discover new books. I've given this book a 9.1 out of 10, and I really hope that if you haven't read the book, that I have convinced you to pick it up, because it is phenomenal. It is such a great novel. Thank you so much for stopping by. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you hopefully next week.